Hammurabae 4 is a game built upon war. The era it is set in was defined by the largest and most globally encompassing war in human history, and it is only logical that the game should be heavily, if not entirely, based upon the macro-military mechanics that define this time. I'm going to be honest, the military aspects are complicated. I have a lot of hours in HOI4, somewhere around 2,500 I think, and even I and many other veterans do not understand everything and can struggle at times. In this tutorial, I will do my best to communicate all of the major and important features of the military and war aspects of HOI4 to you. I may leave stuff out, and if I do, please mention it in the comments, as I will be making replacement videos as needed in the future for feature changes. I'm Hammurabae, let's get going. In this section, I will go through all the military texts to give an overview of what they are and what they do. This will be helpful in terms of making the research screen appear much less intimidating and manageable, in addition for giving you an understanding of the tools at your disposal. This is going to be very long though, so if you want to skip to other parts of the video, go ahead. The Infantry tab covers everything related to the infantry, mechanized infantry, and special forces. Almost any army you field will primarily be made up of one of these three, so these are core texts to understand and utilize. Infantry equipment is the core of your military. Most soldiers will be riflemen, or something in that vein, and in order to do their job, they will need one of these. Every level of infantry equipment you go up, the better your infantry equipment will get, and your infantry as a whole. Every division is composed of men and equipment. The level and quality of the equipment will make them dramatically different. Many newer players assume that getting higher level guns is optional, but this is not the case. Compare the stats difference and you will quickly understand why these are so important. The text above and in between the infantry tech are general stat bonuses to infantry-related divisions. These are very useful, but not the most important. They will give you an advantage against opposing infantry, but are less crucial. Night vision goggles are something you will only get and want late game. Attacking at night gives you a debuff, and can be quite annoying when you are trying to push. This technology reduces that issue slightly. Mobile infantry is split into three groups, which we will cover here: mechanized infantry, rocket artillery, and armored cars. Mechanized infantry are primarily infantry units with attached IFVs and APCs, like half-tracks. They are much better than infantry, in that they have way more piercing and breakthrough, allowing you to push a lot easier against anything besides tanks. They are also fast and a lot of fun to use. Rocket artillery is mechanized infantry on steroids. They have an incredibly high soft attack. The difference between soft and hard attack is easily understood as the type of damage and unit being used. Soft attack is utilized by weaker unit types like infantry, mech, and anything relatively squishy. Hard attack is used and useful against hard unit types like tanks. Motorized rocket artillery will destroy enemy infantry lines and will quickly push through them. Lastly, there are armored cars. These units are used for recon, which we will cover more in the future. Recon allows you to scout the enemy and choose better battle tactics in conflicts, so having these essentially give you an advantage over the enemy in choosing how you go about fighting a battle. Special forces primarily get advantages in certain terrain areas, but are also able to get combat modifiers that simply make them better than normal units. Mountaineers, for example, are able to hold mountains against even armor sometimes, and are incredibly effective. It is important to remember the military options at your disposal are tools and should be used in certain situations and avoided in others. Using a hammer to perform a delicate brain operation is ill-advised. However, it's great for laying train lines. A marine division is fantastic for naval invasions, but it is not the best for holding mountain passes. Marines are what you have to use in naval invasions, as they are miles better than everything else. Mountaineers again should be utilized in rougher terrains like hills and mountains, and paratroopers are what you use to drop behind enemy lines. The special forces bonuses at the bottom simply make them all better. Next, we have support companies. When designing a division in HOI4, you have your main battalion, which makes up the core of a division, and then you have support companies. These are useful because they don't add combat width, which essentially means they are more efficient in usage of their stats, and can stack more on top of the size, while staying the same. They give many bonuses, and we will cover them one by one. Engineers are useful primarily due to their terrain bonuses. Just like real-life terrain defines the outcomes of battles, and how useful certain units are in certain places. For example, using tanks in the Himalayas will not go well. Certain unit types will get debuffs and advantages in certain terrain, and engineers give you an improvement in all areas, especially defensively. Any unit you plan to do some holding with should have them if you can't afford it. They also give it an entrenchment bonus, which allows you to stack more defense and makes it hard to push your divisions, though it takes time to build this up, as you can't make trenches and the like instantaneously. Engineers give you access to another support division called flame tanks. These require you to produce armor with a flamethrower module and give your troops absolutely massive bonuses to terrain and stats. If you have the production for it, these are absolutely worth adding to any division. The next division is recon. Reconnaissance is a very misunderstood statistic, so let me take a moment to explain its actual implications. Recon really just allows you to get more initiative in combat. When a battle is going on, it goes through phases, and at the start of each new one, the division with the highest recon stat in divisions engaged in the battle will allow the general to pick his tactics second. This means the other general will pick his, and then your general will be able to counter whatever tactic he uses, which gives some combat bonuses. This is really not that crucial compared to many other aspects of warfare in HOI4. It is much more important when defending, as these tactics are much more impactful, so if you're holding, it's a small advantage. The main useful aspect of recon support companies are the bonuses to movement speed. If you put these on units like mechanized or armor, you will be able to outmaneuver the enemy quicker and have a higher chance of overrunning them. Recon is not as important as many people will tell you, but it's still very useful. Military police are only useful for garrisons. Cavalry is currently the best type of division for garrisoning occupied territories, which we will cover later on. Adding the support division frees up manpower and divisions. Maintenance companies allow you to retain more equipment through attrition and loss. Every division you field will lose equipment to attrition, which is made worse in certain types of terrain. Guns get lost, tanks break down, artillery will go missing. This is represented in the game with the reliability percent. The higher this is, the less equipment you will lose. Maintenance companies will make you lose less by quite a large margin. These are especially useful if you know you'll be fighting in high attrition terrain like deserts in the Middle East, tundra and marshes in Russia, or things like that. It also allows you to capture more enemy equipment, which will help you face less logistical issues. Field hospitals are exactly what they sound like. These support divisions will allow trickleback, which essentially means that some of your men, which should die, will survive and remain in your manpower pool. In World War II, having good medical logistics allowed many fighting men, especially veterans, to survive and get back in the fight, which was incredibly important. Many will tell you these are useless, which is not true. If you plan to struggle for manpower, they are really useful for infantry and things like that, and will allow you to last longer without going further down your manpower loss, which will hurt your country and your economy. Logistics companies are much more important after the no-stack back update and DLC, which reworks supply mechanics. The reduction in supplies needed are incredibly useful if you fight in low supply areas like Russia or Asia, otherwise they can be ignored. It also reduces fuel usage, which is important for armor and mech divisions if you don't have a lot. Signal companies provide initiative, which is frankly not very important. You can just really ignore these, to be honest. Putting at least a couple of support companies on every division is worth it if you can afford it. They do reduce your org though, so don't add many, or if you do, have a very good reason. Trains are what you will use to move supplies around the map, and we will cover this later. Better versions are cheaper to make, and the armored one will do AA, which means if the enemy uses logistic strikes with their air force, you will be able to shoot down their planes. Railway guns are massive pieces of military technology that when you put close to a line will give massive combat bonuses. They are capturable though, so they can be taken from you, and you can also take them from the enemy. Next we're going to cover armor. Tanks are the strongest weapons on land in World War II, and this time period. The more the technology progresses, the more dangerous they become. What makes them so powerful mechanically is hard attack. This is the metric that lets you fight other armored divisions. If the enemy has hard units like tanks, you're not going to beat them with anything other than armor, or things with piercing. In World War II, infantry could defeat tanks, but imagine if the Battle of Kursk was fought with no tanks on the Russian side. It would have gone very differently. Designing tanks is a pain in the ass to me, and frankly, I don't really enjoy designing them. I will link a good video here that will go into detail on designing them. For the research, the middle portion gives you the chassis, which is the base upon which you build a tank. The left and right sides allow you to upgrade your max level of engines and armor more, which is very advantageous. The individual modules like guns and special pieces you will get over the focus tree. Again, if you're like me, you'll find this inconvenient, and I will link some useful designs in the Division template tutorial. I will also link here, which is designed to simply give you versions that work, so you can move past this. The Artillery Research tab includes anti-air, artillery, anti-tank, and rocket artillery. These will be in a lot of your divisions, so it's important to understand them. Air is still king in HOI4, especially after by blood alone. If you can't do anything against the enemy's air force, you will struggle to push, defend, or do anything other than slowly lose the war. Anti-air will allow you to reduce enemy superiority bonuses. If the enemy has the advantage air-wise, they will get huge bonuses, and AA in divisions will reduce this. If the enemy is using CAS, close air support, AA will also shoot down these planes. This is really important when fighting majors, so it should almost always be researched. Regular artillery is massive for pushing the enemy. Watch any war movie or read any modern military book and you will quickly realize that artillery is incredibly powerful on your side and disastrous if utilized well against you. Mechanically in HOI4, it will give you way more soft attack, and any infantry division you play to push with should have it. Rocket artillery is similar to motorized rocket artillery in that it gives insane soft attack and can melt infantry. It goes a lot slower and complements regular infantry instead. A lecture if you wish to research it. Lastly, we have anti-tank. These battalions will give you piercing and hard attack for infantry, which is what will allow you to actually fight an enemy armored division. If you're fighting Germany, or want the ability to stop armor without having tanks, these will be the difference. Not nearly as important as anti-air or regular artillery though. The naval research I will cover properly in the standalone tutorial I plan to do for Navy. The Naval Research tab concerns regular base vessels and their levels, whereas Naval Support includes your individual guns and components, as well as complementary techs. Air I will also cover separately, but generally it's the same as Naval or tanks. You research the base modules of the planes and can then research better modules, which you can use to make customized designs for whatever you need. Engineering covers a few key techs. Radio gives reinforcement rate, which is how quickly you regain organization after losing it in battle. Try to always get this tech before you fight any major wars. Radar stations give huge naval and air bonuses, which we will cover in their separate tutorials. Atomic research allows you to make nuclear reactors, which produce nukes over time. Experimental rockets allow you to research advanced post-World War II planes. Lastly, we have the Industrial tab, which includes all of the most important research in the game. I will explain production right after this, but the first type is machine tools, which raise your maximum efficiency possible for each equipment type you produce. Keep in mind, this takes a while to get to, and is lowered every time you switch to a newer tech, so it is less important than any other kind. Industry is the core of your ability to construct equipment. Factory output is how much equipment each military factory produces, and the same with dockyards for naval vessels. Production retention is how much efficiency you keep when switching to a new equipment type. The difference between dispersed and concentrated is whether or not you expect to be bombed throughout the war. If you're confident in your ability to retain the air advantage the whole game, concentrated industry is best as it gives more output. Dispersed gives you protections against being bombed. It is also worth noting dispersed allows you to retain more efficiency when switching equipment. If you start with less techs, it might be also worth taking. Synthetic oil lets you produce fuel refineries, which gives you oil artificially. It's not very efficient compared to the real thing, but sometimes you don't have a choice, like when playing as Germany, for example. This includes everything that you will need to cover for research militarily. I only realized again how much there was after writing all this out. On to production. In order to fuel an army, you need equipment. In Hearts of Iron, you can get equipment through Lend-Leases from allied or friendly nations, equipment captured fighting enemy divisions, or produce it in your own military factories. The last one is the main method, and will be what we cover in this section. The basic concept is very simple. Research an equipment type, put it in your production queue, assign it factories, and watch it pump them out. As with anything in the Paradox game, there are layers of depth, which you can choose to get into or not. Again, I am trying to give you a good enough understanding to play the game, not speak at length with the spreadsheet lads like Dankus. Military factories are the core of equipment production. Each one produces a certain amount and can be individually assigned to equipment types. If you want to produce more, you will need more military factories, though there are other factors that will also help. It's important to understand that all factories are not the same between countries and games. Your factories will produce more individually, the higher your factory output is. This stat will improve the base amount that a factory produces, not accounting for anything else. It is a key statistic and should always be prioritized. Individual equipment will also be produced quicker over time. If you go to a factory of workers who have no experience and tell them to produce Tiger tanks, they're not going to be very good starting off. They will still put them out, but it'll be slow due to experience. Over time, the factory workers become more and more skilled at producing Tiger tanks until eventually they are like a machine and can do it without thinking. Anytime you start a new equipment production or switch to another, you will have to build up production efficiency. You can see this here, and it's called exactly the same. This cannot always go up to 100% though. In order to have this become higher, you'll need a higher production efficiency cap, which is how good your workers can get at producing something. Lastly, there is efficiency retention. If I switch Guns 1 to Guns 2 on the same line, it will keep some of its efficiency, since it's similar to the old version, but will lose some. You can get researches and focuses that give you more of this, meaning you can switch equipment and still have a lot of efficiency remaining. Every equipment type needs resources to be produced. It's hard to make a tank without access to steel, for example. We will cover more of this in another section, but it's important in the context of production because you will lose efficiency if you don't have the resources needed. If it's just a few in comparison, it will be a minor 5 to 10%. If you have, for example, only steel and no rubber while producing trucks, it will be much higher, aka you'll produce them much slower. Don't ask me how they're still getting produced in work. I assume they're using wheels made out of wood or something like that. I know this can seem like a little much, but after a while, you will get used to it. Just to recap with the important parts. Military factories produce equipment. Equipment gains efficiently at being produced over time. If you switch production types, you will produce them slower again and have to build it back up. As I said before, every equipment type and naval vessel requires resources to run and produce. These are found all over the map, and if you play the game a lot, you will start learning where they're at, who you will have to trade for them, and where you will need to invade to get them. Much like the modern United States. To see this, click the resource button on the bottom right, as the map will show you there where all the resources are. Unless you are playing a microstate, you will likely have a fair amount, or at least some, though the distribution will be unequal, and you will have to trade for what you need. I covered this more in the economic tutorial I made, so check that out if you want to know more about the trading aspect. Generally, it is important to secure resources you will need for military reasons. Rubber and aluminum for planes is especially important given their dominance in the current state of HOI4 and to a fair degree actual World War II. You are still able to produce equipment without all the requirements for resources, but it will be done to varying levels of inefficiency. If you want to make more out of what you have, make sure to take the excavation tax, as it will boost what you get with the extracted resources. If you are lacking oil specifically, you can also either get some through the Lend-Lease or build fuel refineries that will make some artificially, though it is also extremely inefficient. The Logistics tab covers what equipment you have and need, as well as what rate you are gaining or losing equipment. This is key to look at generally in the game, so make a habit of checking it. Prior to the war, you need to keep in mind you will often lose more than you produce. It is a good idea to have a healthy surplus of all equipment types, but especially guns, trucks, and support equipment. If during a war you see yourself quickly losing equipment, you should reallocate factories so as to be able to at least run a balance if you can. This menu also gives you the choice to choose where fuel goes, though keep in mind if you give it more to one, the other areas will suffer. The Officer Corps menu and system was drastically changed and updated during the No Step Back update. I won't get into every detail here, simply giving you the basics to use it. You can, with political power and command power, which you get naturally over time, choose to spend both on hiring military advisors. These individuals are experts in their field and will give you incredibly powerful universal bonuses. Keep in mind they vary based on country, so you will get better and worse advisors and bonuses depending on which country you play. The command areas will allow you to hire one, so pick wisely from your choices. the military command at the top will cover all areas and will allow up to 3. It is important to take these before or in the beginning of a major war to stay competitive. The spirit of the academy will allow you to spend XP to get a bonus to skill gain for your generals and admirals, which is useful. All the other bonuses will do varied things that are very useful. I'll point out a few to consider taking always here. Professional Officer Corps for the increased command power and XP gained. Static Warfare for more entrenchment, which allows you to defend much better. Efficient Communications for more positioning, which is huge in naval battles. Naval Reform, which gives more naval XP, percentually speaking. Integrated Designers for quicker naval research, which is quite significant. Industrial Liaisons for more air research speed. Branch Independence for more air XP gain. And Centralized Control for better use of aircraft all around. When you conquer territory, it is not just going to roll over and take your rule. There will be partisans who fight back against you, causing potentially huge problems. To a degree, you will have to accept you can't stop all of this. The best thing you can do is make sure you have the men and equipment to garrison your occupied and conquered territories. This is done by going to the political menu and clicking on occupied territories. Here you can see how much compliance you have, which is working with your government, versus resistance, which is going against you. Compliance has different levels and will allow you to eventually get more recruits from your territory and even more factories. You should always seek to garrison occupied territories with cavalry divisions, as they are the most useful. Making a 10-width cavalry division to place here will do a lot of good. This may not be enough, and the other thing you can do is make use of spies. If you have a spy recruited, go to missions and choose the root out resistance mission, and send them to an area where the resistance amount is very high. They will work to lower it over time. Setting front lines is not easy to understand when getting started, or moving your troops generally. You can fight by either executing battle plans, which is a very hands-off approach, or moving your units individually, which is called microing. It is best to use a combination of both. Start off by assigning units to a general, make sure never to go over your limit, and then assign a field marshal. You can make plans of either a general or a field marshal. Your choice is up to you, but I find if I want to be hands-off and have a lot of generals assigned to the same place, using a field marshal is easier. In terms of what you can set, we will cover the important ones. On the far left is training. This allows your units to get higher levels of experience, though it is capped off at level 3. Execution dictates how aggressive you want your troops to be. On the low end, you will do a very slow and meticulous march forward, whereas high will be fast and dangerous, getting out into places of opportunity at the expense of danger, like the Blitzkrieg in World War II. Setting a front line is as quick as clicking on it and left-clicking where you want them to be. If you want to cover less than a full front or a specific area, right-click and drag to the areas you want. Once this is done, your units should move to it. If ever they do not hold, down Control and left-click the line, and they will head into position. Always, always, always set an offensive line after. We will get into the reason in the next section. To do this, click on your offensive line and right-click and drag where you want your armies to push towards. It is also worth setting a fallback line, which is a place your troops can head to if you need them to. Put them anywhere in friendly territory. Making use of terrain for these is critical, as if you are headed back to one, you will likely be on the defense. To send units to it, like the main line, hold down Control and left-click it. If you want to edit any of the ones you have made, click the Edit button and right-click to move the lines. You can also get rid of them entirely by clicking the Delete button and then left-clicking the line you wish to get rid of. To execute the plan, simply click the check mark over at General, and click it again to stop the attack. The main reason to always set an offensive line is the planning bonus. The amount this and how big of a bonus it gives is based off of Doctrine, Generals, Field Marshal training, and Focus Tree bonuses. Essentially, like a real plan, it takes time to build up the planning, and to make sure all of your officers and troops understand the details. After you execute it on day 1, it will probably not go well, versus waiting a month. You can see the planning bonus slowly tick up on units, by usually 1 to 2% daily. When you attack either with micro or with a battle plan order, all of your units will get this bonus, which can be definitive when pushing an enemy. It is also used in defense, so if you are being attacked and have the bonus, you will defend better. Commanders in HOI4 are the way in which you manage your divisions and troops. They have personalities, levels, and traits which will make them better or worse. the start of the game, you will start with a list of already existing generals. Now, if you can afford the command power, you are able to recruit more from the lists. Fresh generals will start out at level 1 and have a randomly generated trait, which can be either good or bad, so pick carefully. Commanders can have up to 24 units assigned to them. If you go over this, you will experience penalties, so it is almost always best to not do so. Experience is gained through fighting battles and combat, naturally, though it is counterintuitive how this happens. The amount of units they are commanding will make them gain XP faster, so if a commander has 24 divisions under his command, he will gain XP quicker than, let's say, 1. They don't need to all be in combat, just assigned to him. Doing more damage than the enemy also gives a bonus, meaning aggressive offensive generals with an advantage will level up quicker. Your XP gained also goes down over time after starting combat, which is why you will see competitive players leveling their generals by starting and stopping combat constantly to level them up quicker. Commanders will also gain traits over time, which can be found here. A lot of them have requirements to be gained. For example, to get engineer, you need a commander leading troops in an offensive or defensive battle over a river. To gain infantry leader, you need a commander who has infantry under their command, etc. Some are much better than others, but I won't get into that here. You also have field marshals. These are the top brass of your military, which you assign commanders to. They have a whole set of different traits, which help with the bigger picture side of warfare. Their stats and traits do impact individual divisions, but it's at a much less significant amount than an actual commander. In order to be a field marshal, you need to promote a commander, which costs command power, or use one of the starting ones if you have them. Both generals and field marshals have access to abilities, which give them basically power-ups. Force attack gives you a huge combat bonus, but doesn't allow you to call off an attack and increases your attrition massively. They are very intuitive, and you can read about them by either hovering over the icon or reading about them in the HOI4 wiki, which I will link here. All of your divisions have experience. This represents how trained and experienced they are in combat. A unit fresh out of boot camp will not do as well in combat as a grizzled veteran unit, having fought for the last 5 years. In order to get up to the experience level of 3, you can train them by clicking the button and watch the level go up over time. You can only get to level 4 and beyond through actual combat. Generally, you always want your troops fully trained before wars and before sending them to the front lines, though sometimes you simply need to plug gaps in your line and can't afford to do so. Doctrine could and has many full videos made about it, but in this tutorial I will simply overview what they are good at to help you choose which one to go for. Mobile warfare is best if you plan to build a strong mechanized or tank corps to push through the enemy and break their lines. It will give you massive tank breakthrough bonuses. This doctrine should allow you to make a superior pushing unit with lots of hardness and armor, which in single player the AI simply can't counter. Almost always you will take superior firepower. This doctrine is designed to give your units good soft attack and pushing ability, and will allow divisions with artillery to do a lot and push the enemy. It is an overall good type which allows your units to be good all around. Infantry especially will benefit from superior firepower. Grand Battle Plan is incredibly effective, making elaborate plans and stacking planning bonuses. Plotting takes time to build up, but once it is at max, Grand Battle Plan will give you a serious edge. It gives you a lot of general unit stat bonuses as well as entrenchment bonuses. If you plan to play defensively, this will be incredibly potent. Mass Assault should not be taken, unless you really need manpower, and even then don't do it. All divisions with vehicles, naval vessels, and planes require fuel to run. It is impossible to make a plane fly without oil, unless you throw it off a very large mountain. And even then, it probably won't go for very long. Fuel is gained by having oil within your borders, building fuel refineries, or receiving it through a lend-lease. Generally, you should always make sure you will have enough by looking at the cost per day by trading all of your air, navy, land, and then throwing a healthy amount on top of that. You can get by with less than what you need, but all of your military will receive heavy debuffs, which you cannot afford in a major war. If you think you'll be struggling for oil, always take the fuel refining techs, as it will give you more than what you need, hopefully. If you start with nothing, you will likely need to conquer places with oil in order to expand and meet your requirements. This is why Navy should not be ignored in HOI4. You will need men to make new divisions and replace the losses in your existing ones. If you're a nation like Russia, this will likely never be an issue. For nations that have few people to start off with like Belgium, you will need to make use of what you have. Manpower is gained by changing your conscription laws, found in your political menu primarily. Anything after all adults serve will start to give major debuffs, so only take it if absolutely necessary. You can also get it through certain focuses, depending on your nation. If you run out of min, you will start to have weaker and weaker divisions, so always keep an eye on your manpower at the top of the screen. Supply used to be relatively simple, though misunderstood, but after No Step Back, it has been made much more complicated. The basic premise is that your supplies are distributed out of your capital and must travel along veins and arteries of your railways and roads to reach your troops in the front lines. If they are small or clogged and cannot transport the amount needed to wage a major war, you will get bottlenecks, which stop your troops getting what they need. Click on the supply button at the bottom right to look at the supply map. Anything reddish means you are not getting supplies properly. In order to deal with this, you will need to upgrade your rail lines. All railways have a certain level, which dictates how much supply can pass through them at a given time. If it is not enough, or you think it will need more in the future, upgrade them, which will cost construction power through your civilian factories. Prior to a war, try to have most of them at level 3, at least, especially on your front lines. Some areas you fight into may lack a supply hub, which is used to distribute out supplies locally. You can also build these, and they will need to be hooked into your supply lines with a railroad. If you click on a supply hub near your front line, you will see a few options. Clicking on Allied Supply will stop your allies getting access to it, which means you will get more, as they cannot eat up your supplies. Keep in mind the AI will likely move their troops off of this line though, so make sure you can hold before doing so. Upgrading bottlenecks will upgrade all places that are slowing down the necessary supplies to reach this area. If you want to do things simply, use this to solve supply issues. Lastly, there is supply level, which dictates how supplies are moved around once off of your trains. Horses are slow and inefficient, and you should optimally use trucks, though you will need enough in your logistics to keep up with demand. Generals will also have a tab like this, which dictates how supplies are moved around with them. Click on a general, and click on motorization priority to move it to trucks. There are 3 levels, which the higher you go are more efficient and capable about moving supply around. The truck cost goes up with each level, so sometimes you may have to not go all the way and suffer. Supply planes are able to offset supply issues by dropping them where needed. They often require green air though, and are inconvenient to make. Hearts of Iron is defined, much like real wars, by terrain. The first thing any good commander or general learns is how to make use of the terrain of a battlefield or war to win. Choosing to mate a defending enemy in the mountain when you could instead maneuver around him to force a battle in plains is something one must always keep in mind. Every province in the game has a terrain given to it, which gives your units bonuses and disadvantages. It also has certain combat width, which essentially means certain divisions will be better in it than others. For example, mountains are 75 width. A 25 width mountaineering division will fit in perfectly. 3 of these pushing or defending will be at max efficiency, as all of their stats will be in play, compared to 2 45 width tank divisions, which get huge stat losses fighting in mountains, and will be over the width, meaning they also lose their power through this. Harsh terrain will cause you to lose trucks over time as well, especially in marshes and jungle, so keep that in mind when fighting there. They also exacerbate attrition, meaning you will lose way more equipment. That means in certain terrain types are much better for defending. If I was protecting France, I would try to fight the enemy in the mountains to hold them back, or pull back to defending the river, which gives advantages, compared to simply moving all the way back to the plains, which give you no advantages. Division types also get terrain bonuses and debuffs, which engineers help a lot with, which is why you should always get them. Consider all this in battle to face the enemy. This has been monstrous to write, and I am sure it has been very long to listen to. If you listen to it all, or even a large portion, but I want to cover as much of the core mechanics needed to play and enjoy the game. Again, HOI4 is a war game, and there is so much to cover. You can go much deeper than what I have covered here, and there are all manner of guides to help you do so if needed. Check out my other HOI4 guides as well as my mod guides. I also stream on Twitch, which is linked in the description. And of course, please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this. It really helps. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you later.